Representative Omar, before the members cast their votes on your recommendations for expanded Somali assistance, I believe they deserve to be informed regarding the $340,000 you personally transferred to Mogadishu during the last 4 years, and exactly who was on the receiving end. Vice President J.D. Vance's declaration sliced through the atmosphere of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee room like a sharpened blade. All heads instantly rotated, and the cameras from C-SPAN and various news networks pivoted away from Ilhan Omar at the witness table toward the entrance where Vance had just materialized. This occurrence was far from standard procedure. Vice presidents simply did not make appearances at committee hearings, particularly those to which they had not received an invitation. Yet there he remained, striding down the central walkway with FBI Director Christopher Wray and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent beside him like prosecutors closing in on a suspect. Omar paused abruptly in the middle of her sentence. She had been speaking for 30 minutes regarding the humanitarian emergency in Somalia, emphasizing the necessity for increased American support and the moral duty to assist displaced persons. The Democrats on the committee had been nodding in sympathetic agreement. The Republicans had appeared disinterested, but not outwardly aggressive. Everything was proceeding precisely according to the schedule until the Vice President of the United States entered, holding a binder stamped with classified labels. Committee Chairman Jim Risch appeared just as bewildered as the rest of the room. "Mr. Vice President, this is highly unorthodox behavior. We are currently in the midst of hearing testimony from a witness." "I realize that, Senator," Vance replied, as he walked directly to the table where Omar was seated and placed the folder before her. "However, Representative Omar is currently testifying regarding United States policy towards Somalia, detailing how much aid we ought to dispatch and which specific groups should obtain American taxpayer funds. I believe that before this committee finalizes any resolutions based on her expert input, they ought to be aware of her private financial ties to entities designated as terrorist organizations within Somalia." The chamber exploded with noise as reporters leaned in closer, and committee members began speaking over one another. Omar's expression transformed from self-assured to ashen in a matter of seconds. Vance unsealed the folder and removed what appeared to be banking records and wire transfer paperwork, all displaying Omar's name quite clearly. "There are 47 distinct wire transfers," Vance stated, his voice rising above the commotion, occurring between January 2020 and October 2024, and amounting to a total of $340,000. Every single cent was sent via money transfer services to a single recipient located in Mogadishu named Ahmed Nur Saeed, your brother-in-law. He laid the papers onto the table surface where the camera lenses could capture them. Omar's signature, her specific bank account digits, the monetary sums, and the timestamps were all visible. Ahmed Nur Saeed runs an enterprise known as the Baccarat Trading Company. The Treasury Department officially categorized it as an entity for financing terrorism in 2023. Ahmed himself is listed on the FBI terrorism watch list. Regarding the funds you transmitted to him, that $340,000, we have tracked it through Hawala networks directly to al-Shabaab operatives, the very terrorists you insist you escaped from as a child. Omar attempted to vocalize a response, but no audio escaped her throat. She stared at the papers as if they were toxic substances. Those documents were her financial records, her personal transactions, and her capital flowing to a brother-in-law she had never once listed in any financial disclosure forms. Chairman Risch recovered his ability to speak. "Mr. Vice President, these are incredibly grave accusations. Do you possess proof to back this up?" "I have 18 months of FBI investigation data," Wray said as he stepped up and opened his own file. "We have wire transfer logs, NSA intercepts of Ahmed Nur Saeed strategizing with al-Shabaab commanders, and Treasury Department tracking that demonstrates Representative Omar's funds were utilized to bankroll terrorist activities. This is not merely an allegation. This is a documented reality." The ranking Democrat Senator Ben Cardin appeared completely horrified. Representative Omar, do you wish to offer a response to these charges? Omar's mouth parted and shut, while her hands clutched the edge of the witness table. She had arrived to champion the cause of Somalia, to establish herself as the representative for refugees and immigrants, and to critique American foreign policy from a position of moral superiority. Now she was positioned at a witness table with proof of terrorism funding laid out before her. C-SPAN was airing this live, and she had no concept of what to say. Those specific transfers were for my relatives. I was assisting family members with their financial needs, she stammered, attempting to explain. With financing al-Shabaab operations, Vance interjected. Director Ray, please demonstrate to the committee exactly where the currency went. Ray displayed a diagram illustrating the flow of funds. It showed the path from Omar's bank account to the money transfer service, then to Ahmed Nur Saeed, and finally to a web of other individuals. Those specific individuals are flagged as financiers and operatives for al-Shabaab. We have tracked $34,000 directly to persons implicated in terrorist assaults, Ray stated with a factual tone. This includes the Mogadishu hotel bombing in 2022 and the strike on African Union peacekeepers in 2023. Both of these operations utilize funds that originated from Representative Omar's wire transfers. Omar stood up suddenly. This is Islamophobia, and this is targeting me because I am a Muslim who speaks out against injustice. This is evidence, Vance replied with a calm demeanor. Bank records do not possess religious prejudice. Wire transfers are not Islamophobic. You transmitted $340,000 to a recognized terrorism financier. That is a federal offense. You committed this act while serving in Congress, while holding access to classified briefings regarding al-Shabaab, and while voting on foreign policy matters that impacted Somalia. He retrieved her voting history. You voted against labeling al-Shabaab as a foreign terrorist organization in 2021. You opposed sanctions against Somali entities in 2022. You advocated for increased assistance to Somalia that would be channeled through organizations your family manages. Every single vote you cast regarding Somalia benefited the interests of your family. You were not representing Minnesota. You were representing Mogadishu. The Democratic members of the committee appeared as though they wished to be anywhere else but there. The Republicans looked invigorated, as if Christmas had arrived ahead of schedule. The cameras recorded every micro-expression on Omar's face as she cycled through defiance, panic, anger, and fear. I want my lawyer, Omar stated, her voice trembling. You will certainly need one, Vance agreed, because the FBI has more than just terrorism financing to discuss with you. Director Ray, please inform the committee about the marriage fraud. Just like that, Ilhan Omar realized this was not merely about money. This was about everything. Every lie, every fraud, and every betrayal was about to be revealed on live television. 4 hours prior, Ilhan Omar had been in her congressional office within the Longworth House office building reviewing her testimony with her staff. She felt excellent and confident. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee had requested her to testify as an expert witness regarding U.S. policy toward Somalia and East Africa. Her expertise stemmed from being Somali-American, a former refugee, and the most prominent voice in Congress on East African matters. This is perfect, her chief of staff said while reviewing the testimony. You are positioning yourself as the moral authority on refugee issues. You attack the administration's Africa policy as being insufficient. You are calling for more aid, more engagement, and more support for Somalia. Omar nodded as she read through her prepared remarks. They were strong, emotional, and personal. She would speak about fleeing Somalia as a child, about the refugee camp in Kenya, and about arriving in America with nothing. She would discuss the American dream that permitted a refugee to become a congresswoman. Then she would pivot to policy. She would explain how America was not doing enough. She would detail how the humanitarian crisis in Somalia demanded more U.S. aid and how reducing assistance was cruel and short-sighted. It would resonate perfectly with her base. It would get her booked on every progressive news program. It would reinforce her brand as the bold voice standing up for refugees and immigrants. "The Republicans will likely attack you," her communications director noted. "They always do, but you are skilled at handling that. Turn it around on them being anti-immigrant. Let them attack," Omar said with confidence. "I am testifying about saving lives. If they want to attack that, they can explain to voters why they hate refugees." What Omar did not know and could not have imagined was that at that exact moment in a secure facility in Virginia, Vice President J.D. Vance was reviewing the final version of an 18-month FBI investigation that would destroy her. The inquiry had begun in June 2023, when the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network flagged unusual wire transfer patterns from Omar's personal bank account. There were 47 transfers to Somalia over 4 years, all structured just under the $10,000 reporting threshold. It was a classic money laundering pattern. Treasury had referred the matter to the FBI. The Bureau had opened a counterterrorism investigation, and what they discovered was worse than anyone had anticipated. Vance sat in the SCCF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, with his investigation team. FBI Director Wray, Treasury Secretary Besant, the NSA Director, and the White House counsel were all there with top-secret clearances and evidence that would end a congressional career. "Walk me through it one more time," Vance said. "I want to ensure we have her dead to rights before I walk into that hearing." Wray opened the primary evidence binder. Representative Ilhan Omar, 42 years old, has been the congresswoman from Minnesota's 5th District since 2019. She was born in Mogadishu, Somalia, in 1982. She came to the United States as a refugee in 1992. She became a citizen in 2000. She was elected to the Minnesota State Legislature in 2016 and to Congress in 2018. Her public narrative is the American dream. A refugee becomes a congresswoman. However, we have found systematic criminal activity spanning her entire time in office. He pulled out the financial records, starting with the money. Between January 2020 and October 2024, Omar made 47 wire transfers from her personal Bank of America account to money transfer services. The total amount was $340,000. All transfers were structured under $10,000 to avoid currency transaction reports. All the money went to one recipient named Ahmed Nur Saeed, who is her brother-in-law, the brother of her first husband. Ahmed is based in Mogadishu, where he operates Baqara Trading Company, ostensibly an import-export business. Vance looked at the surveillance photos. Ahmed Nur Saeed was in Mogadishu, meeting with known al-Shabaab operatives. "How do we know he is a terrorist financier?" "Multiple sources," Wray said. Treasury designated Baqara Trading as a terrorism financing entity in 2023, based on evidence it was being used to move money to al-Shabaab. Ahmed himself is on the FBI terrorism watch list. The NSA has intercepts of him coordinating with known al-Shabaab commanders. He showed the intercepts, which were translated conversations between Ahmed and individuals identified as al-Shabaab financial facilitators, discussing fund transfers and operational needs. "We traced Omar's money through the Hawala network," Treasury Secretary Besant added. Hawala is an informal money transfer system common in Somalia that is very difficult to trace, but we had help from Somali government sources who want al-Shabaab stopped. She showed the money flow. Omar sends money to the transfer service. The transfer service delivers it to Ahmed. Ahmed distributes it through the Hawala network to multiple individuals. We have identified 18 recipients who are confirmed al-Shabaab members or facilitators. We can directly connect $34,000 from Omar's transfers to 2 specific terrorist attacks. The Mogadishu hotel bombing in March 2022 killed 17 people, and the attack on African Union peacekeepers in August 2023 killed 9. Vance absorbed this information. She funded terrorist attacks while serving in Congress. Correct, Wray confirmed. But it gets worse. Her congressional voting record demonstrates she consistently voted in ways that benefited al-Shabaab and her family's interests in Somalia. He pulled up the voting records. In the July 2021 vote to designate al-Shabaab as a foreign terrorist organization, she voted no. She was one of only 3 House members to vote no. Regarding the October 2022 vote to impose sanctions on entities financing terrorism in Somalia, she voted no. In the March 2023 vote on the foreign aid package, she pushed amendments to increase aid to Somalia, specifically to organizations that her family has connections to. She was not just funding terrorism with personal money. She was using her congressional position to advance policies that benefited terrorists and her family. The NSA director added the intelligence dimension. We have been monitoring her communications under a FISA warrant since April 2023. The warrant was approved based on probable cause that she was acting as an agent of a foreign terrorist organization. Her phone calls to Ahmed show her discussing U.S. policy towards Somalia, discussing what legislation is coming, and discussing how to influence aid distribution. She is coordinating with him and using her position to help him. Vance looked at the evidence. It was overwhelming. But he knew the moment he exposed this publicly, Omar would claim Islamophobia and say she was being targeted for being Muslim, for being critical of Israel, or for being a woman of color. "What about the marriage fraud?" he asked. "That has been alleged for years, but never proven." The White House counsel pulled out the DNA evidence. "We finally obtained it." When Omar was arrested for a traffic violation in August, Minnesota took a DNA sample per standard procedure. We got a warrant to compare it to Ahmed Nur Syed Elmi's DNA from when he applied for immigration status. The results show a 99.9% probability they are siblings, specifically brother and sister. Which means when Omar married Ahmed Elmi in 2009, she married her brother. That is immigration fraud. She did it to get him U.S. residency status. Vance read the DNA report, seeing it was definitive. This destroys the no evidence defense she has used for years. And there is tax evasion, Treasury added. She received income from Somali sources that she never reported. Money was flowing back from her family, approximately $250,000 over 5 years, that appears nowhere on her tax returns. She also used campaign funds for personal expenses. Her husband's consulting firm received $2.8 million from her campaign. We have investigated what services he provided. We cannot find any actual work product. Vance sat back and took it all in. Terrorism financing, immigration fraud, tax evasion, campaign finance violations, and using a congressional position to benefit foreign interests. It was the most complete corruption case he had seen against a sitting member of Congress. She is testifying at the Foreign Relations Committee today, Vance said, regarding Somalia aid. She is recommending the U.S. send more money to organizations connected to her family, while she is actively funding terrorists there. He made his decision. I am going to that hearing. I am walking in with this evidence on live television, and I am ending her career today. His team looked at each other. That is unprecedented, the White House counsel said. Vice presidents do not ambush witnesses at committee hearings. I am not ambushing a witness, Vance said. I am exposing a terrorist financier who happens to hold a congressional seat. There is a difference. At 2 p.m., the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing began. Chairman Risch gavelled it in. Today, we are examining U.S. policy towards Somalia and East Africa. We are honored to have Representative Ilhan Omar as our witness, given her expertise and background. Omar took her seat at the witness table, adjusted her microphone, and looked at the cameras with practiced confidence. This was her element, speaking truth to power and advocating for the powerless. Chairman Risch, Ranking Member Cardin, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me. I want to talk today about the humanitarian crisis in Somalia and what America can do to help. She launched into her testimony, which was emotional and personal, describing her experience as a child refugee. She spoke of the trauma of fleeing violence, the hope of coming to America, and the opportunity this country gave her. But America is not doing enough for the people who are suffering now. The drought in Somalia has displaced millions. The conflict with al-Shabaab continues to destabilize the region, and American aid has been cut when it should be increased. She called for more funding, more aid organizations, and more engagement with Somali civil society. She made it sound noble, humanitarian, and moral. The Democratic senators nodded along. Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut asked sympathetic questions about the humanitarian situation. Senator Chris Coons from Delaware asked about refugee resettlement. Omar was hitting her stride. This was going perfectly. In 30 minutes, she would be done, would do a press conference attacking Republicans for not caring about refugees, and would be on MSNBC by tonight talking about her powerful testimony. Then the doors at the back of the hearing room opened. Vice President J.D. Vance walked in. Not announced, not invited. He just walked in with the FBI Director and Treasury Secretary. He headed straight down the aisle toward the witness table. The room went silent. Senators stopped mid-question. Staffers froze. Cameras swiveled to capture this completely unprecedented moment. Omar watched him approach, confusion on her face. Why was the vice president here? This was not his committee. He had no role in this hearing. Then she saw the classified folder in his hand, saw the expression on his face, and felt the first flutter of real fear. Vance reached the witness table and set his folder down in front of Omar with a solid thump that echoed in the now silent room. Chairman Risch tried to regain control. "Mr. Vice President, this is highly unusual. We are in the middle of a committee hearing." "I am aware, Senator Risch." Vance's voice was respectful but firm. "But Representative Omar is testifying about Somalia, about how much American aid should go there, and about which organizations should receive taxpayer money. Before this committee votes on anything based on her recommendations, I believe the members should know about her personal financial connections to the very terrorist organizations we are supposed to be fighting." The room erupted. Reporters scrambled for phones, and committee members talked over each other. Omar's face cycled from confusion to anger to something close to panic. Senator Cardin, the ranking Democrat, found his voice. "Mr. Vice President, that is an extraordinary accusation. Do you have evidence to support it?" Vance opened the folder. He pulled out bank records. He set them on the table facing the cameras so everyone could see. 47 wire transfers from January 2020 through October 2024. The total amount was $340,000. All were from Representative Omar's personal bank account. All were sent to Mogadishu, Somalia. All went to one recipient. He placed each document deliberately. Wire transfer confirmations and bank statements were visible, all with Omar's name clearly printed. Her signature, her account numbers, and the amounts ranging from $3,000 to $9,000 were always under the $10,000 reporting threshold. The recipient was Ahmed Nur Saeed, Representative Omar's brother-in-law. Ahmed operates a business in Mogadishu called Baccarat Trading Company. Vance pulled out Treasury Department documents. In September 2023, the United States Treasury Department designated Baccarat Trading as a terrorism financing entity. Ahmed Nur Saeed himself is on the FBI terrorism watch list. And regarding the money Representative Omar sent to him, we have traced it through Hawala networks to al-Shabaab operatives. Omar tried to stand, but her legs would not work. That is, those were family transfers. I was helping family with financing. With financing terrorism, Vance said flatly. Director Wray, show the committee the money trail. FBI Director Wray stepped forward with his own evidence. He showed flowcharts showing the money movement. It went from Omar's bank to Western Union, to Ahmed Nur Saeed, to a network of individuals in Mogadishu and surrounding areas. We have identified 18 recipients of funds that originated from Representative Omar's transfers, Wray said, his voice clinical and professional. All 18 are on terrorism watch lists. 7 are confirmed al-Shabaab members. 4 are financial facilitators for the organization. The remaining 7 provide logistical support. He pulled up photographs of men in Mogadishu, some in military-style clothing and some in traditional dress, all labeled with names and terrorism-related designations. We can directly trace $34,000 from Representative Omar's transfers to two specific terrorist attacks. The Mogadishu hotel bombing on March 15, 2022, that killed 17 people, including 2 American aid workers, and the attack on African Union peacekeepers on August 23, 2023, that killed 9 soldiers. The committee room was deathly silent. Every senator stared at the evidence, and every camera captured Omar's face as the color drained from it. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, spoke up. His voice was hard. "Representative Omar, did you or did you not send $340,000 to a designated terrorism financier?" Omar's mouth opened. It closed. It opened again. "I sent money to family. I had no knowledge of what they were doing with it." "You are on the House Foreign Affairs Committee," Vance interrupted. "You received classified briefings about al-Shabaab and about terrorism financing networks in Somalia. You knew or should have known exactly what your brother-in-law was doing, and you sent him money anyway." Senator Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida, piled on. "Mr. Vice President, you mentioned her voting record. Can you elaborate?" Vance pulled out congressional voting records. "Representative Omar has voted on Somalia-related issues multiple times. Her voting pattern is interesting." He read from the documents. July 2021, House vote on resolution to designate al-Shabaab as a foreign terrorist organization. The vote was 417 to 3. 3 members voted no. Representative Omar was one of them. She voted against designating the organization she was secretly funding as a terrorist group. Gasps emanated from the audience. Some senators literally leaned back in shock. October 2022 vote on imposing sanctions on entities that finance terrorism in East Africa. Representative Omar voted no. She was one of 7 members to vote no. March 2023 foreign aid appropriations. Representative Omar introduced amendments to increase aid to Somalia by $200 million. The aid was supposed to go to humanitarian organizations, but she specifically pushed for organizations with ties to her family's business interests. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, was practically vibrating with anger. So she was funding terrorists with personal money and trying to get taxpayer money sent to organizations her family controls. "That appears to be the case," Vance confirmed. Omar finally found her voice. "It came out too loud and too defensive. This is Islamophobia. This is the same targeting that Muslims in this country have faced for decades. You are attacking me because I speak out against American imperialism, because I criticize Israel, and because I am a Muslim woman who won't be silent. This is evidence." Vance's voice cut through her rising volume. "Bank records are not Islamophobic. Wire transfers do not have religious bias. You sent $340,000 to a designated terrorism financier. That is material support for terrorism under federal law, Title 18, Section 2339B of the U.S. Code. It carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison." He pulled out the statute and showed it to the committee. "The law is clear. Providing material support, including money to foreign terrorist organizations, is a federal crime. It does not matter if you claim it was for family. It does not matter if you claim you did not know the money went to terrorists. You are guilty." Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, looked pained but asked the obvious question. "Representative Omar, can you explain these wire transfers?" Omar looked at Murphy like he had betrayed her. He was a Democrat. He was supposed to be on her side, but he was looking at the evidence spread on the table and could not ignore it. "I sent money to family members who were struggling," Omar said, her voice shaking. "Somalia is a poor country. My family needed help. I had no idea what Ahmed was doing with it." "You had extensive idea," Ray interrupted. "We have NSA intercepts of your phone calls with Ahmed. These are conversations where you discussed U.S. policy towards Somalia, where you told him about upcoming legislation, and where you coordinated with him about which organizations should receive aid." He pulled out transcripts redacted to protect sources and methods, but with enough detail visible to be damning. Phone call from May 2022. You told Ahmed that the House Foreign Affairs Committee was considering sanctions on Somali businesses. You discussed how to structure his company to avoid those sanctions. That is coordination with a foreign entity to evade U.S. law. Phone call from November 2023. You discussed with Ahmed how much aid money would be coming to Somalia and which organizations would receive it. You were sharing classified information from committee briefings with a terrorism financier. Omar was shaking her head. Those calls were about family business. They were about using your congressional position to help terrorists, Vance said. But we are not done. Secretary Besant, tell the committee about the tax evasion. Treasury Secretary Besant stepped forward with more documents. In addition to the money Representative Omar sent to Somalia, we have identified money flowing back to her from Somali sources. This is approximately $250,000 over 5 years. This money appears nowhere on her tax returns. She showed the financial tracking. Money came through various channels, some through her husband's consulting company, some through shell companies, and some in cash. But we have traced it all, and she reported none of it to the IRS. That is tax evasion. Title 26, Section 7201 involves a penalty of up to 5 years in prison and $250,000 in fines. Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa and a longtime crusader against government waste, jumped in. What about her campaign finances? There have been allegations for years about her paying her husband's company. Besant nodded. Her campaign paid her husband's consulting firm, E Street Group, $2.8 million between 2019 and 2024. We investigated what services this company provided. We interviewed campaign staff, asked for deliverables, work product, or anything showing what they did for almost $3 million. Nobody could describe actual work. The company has no website, no other clients, and no apparent expertise. It appears to be a shell company created solely to funnel campaign money to her household. That is conversion of campaign funds for personal use. That is a federal election law violation. That is fraud. Vance pulled out what was clearly the most explosive evidence. It was a DNA report with official federal seals on it. And then there is the immigration fraud. The allegations have existed for years. Representative Omar has dismissed them as conspiracy theories, racist smears, and baseless accusations. Let me show the committee why those accusations were accurate. He held up the DNA report. In August 2024, Representative Omar was stopped for a traffic violation in Minnesota. Standard procedure in Minnesota is to collect DNA samples during any arrest or citation. That sample was entered into the federal database. We obtained a warrant to compare her DNA to that of Ahmed Nur Said Elmi. Ahmed Elmi was the man Representative Omar married in 2009. She claimed he was unrelated to her, just a man she married, then divorced in 2017, before remarrying her first husband, Ahmed Hirsi. Vance showed the DNA results. The comparison shows a 99.9% probability that Ilhan Omar and Ahmed Nur Said Elmi are biological siblings. They share the same parents. They are brother and sister. The committee room exploded. Senators were shouting, reporters were on phones, and cameras were zooming in on Omar's face as she sat frozen, unable to deny scientific evidence. She married her brother, Vance said over the chaos. She did it to help him obtain U.S. residency status. That is immigration fraud under Title 8, Section 1325 of the U.S. Code. It is also marriage fraud under Title 8, Section 1182. Both are felonies. Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas, was on his feet. This is a sitting member of Congress who committed immigration fraud to get her brother into the country. Correct, Vance confirmed. And it gets worse. Ahmed Elmi, her brother, has connections to extremist groups in Somalia. By helping him obtain U.S. residency, she potentially facilitated the entry of an individual with terrorist ties. Omar finally exploded. This is a lie. This is fabricated evidence you are manufacturing. It is a DNA test, Vance said calmly. From a federal laboratory. Chain of custody is documented and scientifically verified. You can challenge it in court, but the science does not lie. You married your brother. Senator Cardin tried to regain some order. Mr. Vice President, these are extraordinary allegations. Does Representative Omar have an opportunity to respond with counsel present? She can have all the counsel she wants, Vance said, but the evidence does not change. The wire transfers are documented. The money trail to terrorists is documented. The DNA test is scientific fact. The tax evasion is proven by her own returns. The campaign finance violations are on record with the FEC. He turned to face Omar directly. You came to America as a refugee. This country gave you safety, education, and opportunity. You became a citizen. You got elected to Congress. You had every advantage, and you used your position to fund the terrorists you claimed to have fled from. You betrayed everyone who believed in you. Omar's eyes were wet now. Whether from anger or fear or shame, it was impossible to tell. I dedicated my life to helping refugees and to fighting for immigrant rights. You dedicated your life to enriching yourself and your family while using progressive politics as cover. Vance interrupted. You are not a champion of refugees. You are a fraud who exploited your refugee story for personal gain and political power. And while you were lecturing Americans about their moral failures, you were wiring hundreds of thousands of dollars to terrorists. Chairman Risch tried to restore order. I think, given the severity of these allegations, this committee needs to adjourn. And no, Senator Cotton cut him off. We are not adjourning. We have a witness under oath who has been accused of terrorism financing and immigration fraud. I want answers. Representative Omar, did you send $340,000 to Ahmed Nur Saeed? Silence. Omar staring at the table. Did you marry your brother to help him get immigration status? More silence. Did you fail to report $250,000 in income on your tax returns? Still, nothing. Senator Rubio stood. Mr. Chairman, the witness is refusing to answer direct questions about material support for terrorism. I move that this committee immediately refer this matter to the Department of Justice and vote to recommend the House expel Representative Omar. Second, Senator Cotton said immediately. The Democrats on the committee looked at each other. They knew what was coming. The evidence was overwhelming. If they defended Omar now, they would be defending a terrorism financier. But if they voted against her, they would face backlash from the progressive wing. Senator Murphy made the calculation. I think we need to see all the evidence before voting on anything, but this should absolutely be referred to DOJ. Agreed, Senator Coons said quietly. Other Democrats nodded. Omar looked around wildly, every Democrat abandoning her. Every Republican was already calling for her head. The evidence spread across the table where millions were watching on C-SPAN. I want my attorney, she said, her voice barely audible. You will have plenty of time to talk to attorneys, Vance said. Director Ray, I believe you have something to tell Representative Omar. Ray pulled out a document and read from it formally. Ilhan Abdullahi Omar, based on evidence gathered during an 18-month investigation into material support for terrorism, immigration fraud, tax evasion, and related offenses, a federal grand jury has returned an indictment. There are FBI agents waiting outside this hearing room. When you leave, you will be taken into federal custody. Omar's face went white. You cannot arrest a sitting member of Congress. We can arrest anyone who commits federal crimes, Ray said. The Constitution protects you from arrest while Congress is in session for minor offenses, not for felonies, not for terrorism. You are going to be arrested, Representative Omar. Today, the hearing room erupted again. This was not just political theater. This was an actual arrest of a sitting Congresswoman happening in real time on live television. Chairman Risch gavelled repeatedly, trying to restore order. This hearing is adjourned. Representative Omar, you are dismissed. Omar was already standing, trying to leave, but her legs were shaking so badly she could barely walk. Her staff tried to help her, but she pushed them away and walked toward the exit on unsteady legs. Every camera was following her. She reached the door, pushed it open, and found 6 FBI agents waiting in the hallway. The agents moved efficiently and professionally. They had done this 1,000 times, but never to a sitting member of Congress. Never on live television with cameras capturing every second. Ilhan Abdullahi Omar, you are under arrest for material support for terrorism, immigration fraud, tax evasion, and related charges. The lead agent read from the indictment as another agent moved behind Omar with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Get your hands off me, Omar tried to pull away. This is illegal. You cannot arrest me. I am a member of Congress. You are a suspect in a terrorism financing case, the agent said calmly. Put your hands behind your back. The handcuffs went on, with a sharp click. The sound echoed in the marble hallway. Cameras captured every moment. Omar in handcuffs being arrested by federal agents, while other members of Congress watched from the doorway in shocked silence. This is political persecution, Omar shouted as the agents began walking her toward the elevator. This is the Trump administration targeting its critics. This is 18 months of evidence showing you funded al-Shabaab, one of the agents said quietly. Not unkindly, just stating fact. Save it for your lawyer, ma'am. The elevator doors closed on Ilhan Omar in handcuffs. FBI agents were on either side. Her career as a congresswoman was over after just 6 years. The doors closed, and she was gone. Back in the hearing room, the committee sat in stunned silence. Then Senator Rubio spoke. Mr. Chairman, I move that this committee vote immediately on a resolution referring Representative Omar to the House Ethics Committee, with recommendation for immediate expulsion. Second, said Senator Cotton. The vote was unanimous, 15-0. Every Democrat and every Republican voted to recommend Omar's expulsion. Within an hour, the footage was everywhere. Not edited clips, but full video of the entire confrontation. Vance presenting evidence, Omar unable to answer questions, the DNA test proving she married her brother, and the money trail to terrorists. The arrest. Congresswoman arrested for terrorism financing was the headline on every news site. Not Fox News spinning it, just the facts. A sitting member of Congress arrested by the FBI for funding al-Shabaab. By evening, the House had scheduled an emergency expulsion vote for the next day. Speaker Mike Johnson issued a statement. The evidence presented today is overwhelming. If Representative Omar funded terrorism while serving in Congress, she cannot remain in this body. Even progressive Democrats were running away. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez issued a statement. If these allegations are true, they represent a complete betrayal of progressive values. We must let the legal process proceed. Bernie Sanders stated, terrorism has no place in our political movement. These are serious charges that must be addressed through the justice system. The Squad, Omar's closest allies in Congress, were all distancing themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with a terrorism financier. That night, Omar sat in federal detention at the Alexandria Detention Center. She was not in general population, but in protective custody for her own safety, and because of the sensitive nature of the charges. Her lawyer, a high-profile criminal defense attorney she had hired with emergency funds, sat across from her in the visitation room going through the evidence. This is bad, Ilhan. This is really bad. Omar was still in shock. They cannot prove I knew the money was going to terrorists. I was sending it to family. Your brother-in-law is on the terrorism watch list, the lawyer said flatly. You are on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. You get classified briefings about al-Shabaab. The prosecution will argue you knew or should have known. And frankly, the jury will believe them. What about the DNA test? Can we challenge that? The lawyer sighed. It is from a federal laboratory. Chain of custody is documented. The science is solid. You married your brother, Ilhan. That is a provable fact. It was just to help him get status. Lots of people do that. Lots of people do not become congresswomen and then get caught. And lots of people do not marry brothers who have terrorist connections. This is not a typical immigration fraud case. Omar put her head in her hands. What are my options? Honestly, take a plea. The evidence is overwhelming. If you go to trial on terrorism financing charges, you could get 25 years. But if you plead guilty, show remorse, and cooperate with investigators about the Al-Shabaab network, you might get 10 years. 10 years in prison. You funded terrorist attacks that killed people, Ilhan, including 2 American aid workers. If the prosecution can prove even $1 you sent was used in those attacks, you are looking at life without parole. 10 years is a gift. The next morning, the House of Representatives held an emergency session. The vote on expulsion required a 2/3 majority of 290 votes. The final tally was 376 to 54. Only 54 members, all progressive Democrats from safe seats, voted against expulsion. Every Republican voted yes. Most Democrats voted yes. Even Omar's former squad allies abstained rather than defend her. She was expelled, the 3rd fastest expulsion in House history. Gone after 6 years. The criminal trial began in February 2025 in federal court in Washington, D.C. Omar pleaded not guilty to all charges. Her defense strategy was to claim she was being politically persecuted, that the evidence was manufactured, and that she was targeted for being Muslim. The prosecution presented the wire transfers, the money trail to Al-Shabaab, NSA intercepts of her phone calls with Ahmed, the DNA test proving she married her brother, her tax returns showing unreported income, and her campaign finance violations. It took the jury 3 days to deliberate. When they came back, the verdict was devastating. Guilty on 17 counts of material support for terrorism. Guilty on 3 counts of immigration fraud. Guilty on 5 counts of tax evasion. Guilty on 4 counts of campaign finance violations. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The judge, an Obama appointee who could not show any bias, was harsh at sentencing. Miss Omar, you came to this country as a refugee. America gave you everything: safety, education, and opportunity. You became a citizen. You were elected to Congress. You had a platform to actually help people. And you used it to fund the very terrorists you claim to have fled from. The money you sent to Ahmed Nursaid was used to finance attacks that killed innocent people, including 2 American aid workers who were in Somalia trying to help refugees like you once were. Their blood is on your hands. You married your brother to commit immigration fraud. You evaded taxes. You stole campaign money. And you did all of it while lecturing Americans about their moral failings. I sentence you to 23 years in federal prison, 15 years for terrorism charges, 5 years for immigration fraud, 3 years for tax evasion to be served consecutively. You will also pay restitution of $340,000. And I am recommending to the Department of Homeland Security that your citizenship be revoked for fraud. You obtained it illegally. You do not deserve it. Omar broke down crying. 23 years. She would be 65 when she got out, if she got out. If her citizenship was revoked, she would be deported after serving her sentence. The denaturalization proceedings began immediately with the DNA evidence proving she had married her brother to commit fraud and her conviction for terrorism financing. It was a formality. In June 2025, a federal judge revoked her U.S. citizenship. Ilhan Abdullahi Omar was no longer an American citizen. She was a convicted terrorist financier, serving 23 years in federal prison, facing deportation to a country that did not want her. 6 months after her conviction, Ilhan Omar sat in her cell at FCI Coleman, a medium-security federal prison in Central Florida. Far from Minneapolis, far from her former district, and far from everything, she was inmate number 67854-018. That was her identity now. Not congresswoman, not activist, not refugee success story, just a number. Her first few months in prison had been brutal. Other inmates knew who she was, knew she had been a congresswoman, and knew she had been convicted of funding terrorism. Nobody likes terrorists in prison, not even the criminals. Omar had been attacked twice in the first month, both times by inmates who had lost family members in terrorist attacks. She had been moved to protective custody for her own safety. Now she spent 23 hours a day in her cell. 1 hour for exercise in a small yard. No contact with other inmates. No visitors except her lawyer. Her family had abandoned her. Her husband divorced her while she was awaiting trial. Her children, ages 16, 14, and 10, had been taken by their father. He had changed their last names. They moved to another state. They did not visit, did not write, and wanted nothing to do with their mother, the terrorist. Her siblings in America had issued public statements denouncing her. She betrayed our family. She betrayed America. She betrayed every refugee who came here honestly, even the Somali American community in Minneapolis. The community that had elected her wanted nothing to do with her. The Somalia Community Center issued a statement. Ilhan Omar does not represent us. She has damaged our community's reputation. We condemn her actions. The political fallout was immense. Her district in Minneapolis held a special election. For the first time in 60 years, a Republican won. The Republican, a Somali American woman who ran on the slogan, "Not all Somali Americans fund terrorism," won with 57%. Nationally, Democrats ran away from Somalia issues, from refugee issues, and from anything associated with Omar. The Omar effect became shorthand for how one person's corruption could poison an entire movement. Muslim candidates across the country faced hostile questions. How do we know you are not like Ilhan Omar? It was unfair. It was prejudiced. But Omar had created the association. Progressive Democrats who had championed her were humiliated. AOC had to answer questions about why she had supported Omar for years. Bernie Sanders faced criticism for endorsing her. The squad disbanded entirely. Meanwhile, Omar's appeals went nowhere. The evidence was too strong. The wire transfers were documented fact. The DNA test was scientific proof. The convictions stood. In December 2026, her lawyer brought news she had been dreading. Somalia has agreed to accept you for deportation. Omar looked up from her prison jumpsuit. What? After you serve your sentence, or if you are released early for good behavior, you will be deported to Somalia. They have confirmed they will accept you as a citizen, but I have not been there since I was 10 years old. I do not know anyone. I do not. You funded al-Shabaab while you were in Congress, her lawyer said bluntly. You are lucky Somalia is accepting you at all. Most countries will not take convicted terrorists. Omar sat back in her chair. The reality was sinking in. Even if she survived 23 years in federal prison, even if she got out early, she would be deported to a country she did not know, to a region controlled by the very terrorists she had funded. What will I do there? She asked quietly. That is not my problem, her lawyer said. My job was to defend you at trial. I did that. You lost because the evidence was overwhelming. What happens after you are deported is up to you. Year 1 in prison, the media still covered her. Disgraced congresswoman serving 23 years for terrorism made occasional headlines when there were updates on appeals or legal proceedings. Year 2, the coverage dropped off. She was old news, and there were other scandals and other stories. Year 3, she was forgotten. Just another federal inmate serving time. The former congresswoman, who had been such a rising star, was now just inmate 67854, Institute 018, working in the prison laundry for 12 cents an hour. In Minneapolis, her former district had moved on. The new congresswoman, Ilhan Hirsi, no relation, was popular, effective, and everything Omar had pretended to be. When reporters occasionally asked about Omar, Hirsi's response was always the same. She betrayed our community. She betrayed refugees. She betrayed America. I do not speak about her. 5 years into her sentence, Omar got a letter from one of her children, the oldest, who is now 21. The letter was short. I changed my name. I go by Dad's last name now, not yours. I am in college. I am studying international relations. I want to actually help refugees, not betray them like you did. Don't write back. I do not want to hear from you. Omar read the letter 3 times, then put it away. She did not cry. She had cried herself out in the first year. Now there was just numbness. Year 7, a reporter from Vice wrote a long-form piece about her. Where is Ilhan Omar now? It described her prison routine, her isolation, her failed appeals, and her impending deportation. The article included an interview conducted through her lawyer. One question stood out. Do you regret what you did? Her answer relayed through the lawyer was simple. I regret getting caught. Not regret for funding terrorism. Not regret for the people killed. Not regret for betraying America. Just regret for getting caught. The article went viral for a day. Then it was forgotten. Year 10. She came up for early release consideration. Good behavior. Model prisoner could potentially be released after 15 years instead of 23. The parole board denied her. No remorse shown, no acceptance of responsibility. Continues to claim persecution rather than admitting guilt. Denied. Year 12, another parole hearing, another denial. Still claims she was politically targeted. Still will not take responsibility for funding terrorists. Denied. Year 15, she was finally granted release. After 15 years in federal prison, she had served enough time. At age 57, she walked out of FCI Coleman a free woman for about 6 hours. ICE agents were waiting, immigration and customs enforcement. Because she was no longer a U.S. citizen, she was an illegal alien subject to deportation. They took her into custody. They drove her to an ICE detention facility. They held her for 3 days while arranging the flight to Somalia. On a Tuesday morning in June 2040, Ilhan Abdullahi Omar boarded a commercial flight from Miami to Mogadishu in handcuffs, escorted by agents who would hand her over to Somali authorities. The flight took 14 hours. She sat in the back by herself with an ICE agent on either side. The other passengers knew who she was and avoided eye contact. Nobody wanted to sit near the deported terrorist. They landed in Mogadishu in the late afternoon. It was hot, dusty, and nothing like the city she had left as a child 33 years ago. Everything had changed, and she knew nobody. Somali authorities met her at the airport. They were not warm or welcoming the return of a native daughter, but taking custody of a problem the Americans were dumping on them. You are not welcome here, one official told her bluntly, but we have no choice but to accept you. Stay out of trouble. Don't associate with Al-Shabaab. We will be watching. They released her at a refugee processing center, gave her $50 in local currency, and told her she was on her own. Ilhan Omar, former United States Congresswoman, stood in the middle of Mogadishu with $50 and nowhere to go. No family who would speak to her. No friends, no connections, just a middle-aged woman who had betrayed everyone who had ever believed in her. She tried to find work, but her name was known. You are the one who funded Al-Shabaab from America. Employers did not want to hire her. They could not risk the association. She tried to connect with the Somali diaspora. They wanted nothing to do with her. You made all of us look like terrorists. 6 months after her deportation, she was living in a one-room apartment in a slum neighborhood, surviving on odd jobs, cleaning, cooking, or whatever work she could find. 1 year after deportation, a journalist tracked her down from The Guardian. They wanted to do a story on Ilhan Omar from Congress to exile. Omar agreed to the interview, desperate for any connection to her former life or any acknowledgement that she had once mattered. The journalist asked the obvious question. Do you regret it? Omar had 15 years in prison to think about her answer, to develop some insight, and to show growth. Her answer, I regret trusting the wrong people. I regret not being more careful. I regret letting my family down. Still no real accountability, still no acknowledgement that she had funded terrorism, that people had died because of money she sent, or that she had betrayed America. The article ran with the headline, Ilhan Omar, Still No Remorse. And that was the last major coverage she received. After that, nothing. Complete obscurity. In Washington, her name became a punchline and a cautionary tale. When politicians were accused of corruption, opponents would say, don't pull an Ilhan Omar. When refugees were discussed, someone would always bring up Omar as an example of why we needed better vetting. It was unfair to other refugees, but Omar had created that association. In Minneapolis, the Somali American community erected a memorial to the 2 American aid workers killed in the 2022 Mogadishu bombing. The bombing funded by money Ilhan Omar had sent to her brother-in-law. The memorial had 2 plaques, one honoring the aid workers and one acknowledging that members of the Somali American community condemned terrorism in all forms. Nobody mentioned Omar by name, but everyone knew. VP J.D. Vance, who had exposed her at that committee hearing 5 years ago, was asked about her in an interview. Ilhan Omar's story should have been inspiring, he said. Refugee escapes violence, comes to America, becomes Congresswoman. The American dream. But she betrayed that dream. She used her position to fund the very terrorists she claimed to have fled from. Now she is deported living in poverty in Somalia, and nobody cares. That is not political persecution. That is justice. In Mogadishu, Ilhan Omar turned 60, living in that one-room apartment. No family, no friends, no purpose, just existing. Sometimes she thought about what could have been. If she had actually been the congresswoman she had pretended to be. If she had actually fought for refugees instead of enriching herself and her family. If she had been honest. But mostly she did not think about it because thinking about what she had lost was too painful. She was 62 when she died. Heart attack in her apartment. Nobody found her for 3 days until the neighbors complained about the smell. There was no funeral, no memorial service, and no obituary in American papers. The Guardian ran 3 paragraphs. Ilhan Abdullahi Omar, former U.S. Congresswoman who was convicted of terrorism financing and deported, died in Mogadishu at age 62. Omar served in Congress from 2019 to 2025 before being expelled and convicted of sending $340,000 to al-Shabaab operatives. She served 15 years in federal prison before deportation. She has survived by 3 children who declined to comment. That was it. That was the legacy. From refugee to congresswoman to convicted terrorist to deported exile dying alone in poverty, she had possessed every advantage and every opportunity. And she had betrayed it all. Not because of Islamophobia, not because of racism, not because of political persecution, but because she had made a choice to fund terrorists, to lie about her marriage, to evade taxes, to steal campaign money, and to betray America. And in the end, she paid for those choices. Not with a few years of bad press, not with losing an election, but with 15 years in prison, deportation, and dying alone in the country she had betrayed America to assist. That was not persecution. That was consequence. It was the inevitable result of her actions, and it was exactly what she deserved.